Hey everybody, my name is Chad Knight. I'm the head of cyberware for Wilder World. And Wilder World is an immersive 5D metaverse that is powered by the Ethereum blockchain. And it's going to be opening up in 2022 early, and if you have any interest in checking it out, go over to wilderworld.com, and there is already plenty of information, examples, and NFTs that can be purchased for the platform already. So what I'm going to be doing today is walking you through the hair system in Cinema 4D. It's something that for a long time I thought was a little bit overwhelming and intimidating looking until I dove into it. And it's one of the most enjoyable things to just play around with and explore in Cinema 4D. So that's what I'm going to be doing with you today. And we can just dive right in. So the first thing we want to do is go up to this cube here and hold it down with your left mouse button and select Polygon. So this is the most basic form of geometry we're going to be able to find in 3D. I'm going to change the orientation here to -Z, which is facing the camera. And I already have my scene set up. So I'm using the Octane render engine. I've got my HDRI. I have my environment tag, which is my visible environment, to just have a white background, my HDRI, and my camera. So we can hide this though and just focus on the polygon. So we have a polygon set. Again, I have it to -Z for orientation, so it's facing the cameras. I'm going to keep the segments at 1. We can explore increasing these later. Width is fine. I'm going to hit S to frame it up. Now, with the polygon selected, we're going to go up to the very top here to the Simulate tag and go to Hair Object. You're going to, again, hold down the left mouse key so that you can keep this menu open. Go to Add Hair, and it will automatically apply the hair to whatever you have selected. And in this case, we have the polygon selected, because that's all we have in our scene. So as you can see, we already have hair. It just automatically applies it. And if you go down and press play on the timeline, you can see that this is already set. I mean, there's obviously a lot of things you're going to want to change and optimize, but you've got a very, very complex and excellent looking hair system built in with a couple clicks. So the first thing I want to do is we're going to go through the hair object. Now, there's different settings for the hair object and the hair material. They both have different attributes and control different parts of the hair system. First part we're going to look at are the guides, and you want to think of the guides as a cloner object that tells the hair where to go. So instead of having to calculate thousands of these guides, it clones them onto this guide, which is already cloned onto the polygon. It's very meta. So first thing we're going to do is change the count. So actually, sorry, the first thing we're going to do is where these are rooted from. So where the guides come out is probably the first thing that you're going to want to explore. It defaults to polygon vertex. There's 4 vertices on a polygon. As we can see, when we set the shader, there are 4 points on the corners, but we are going to change this to polygon area. The other options are polygon, where it's going to just come out of the polygon area, which looks the same to me. Polygon center, which will probably give you 1 in the middle. Vertices, which we did before. Edge, which will give them around the edges. UV grid, and custom. So what we're going to explore is polygon area. Now, let's change this to 10 first. And we're going to hit regrow. So every time you change these or something with like the growth, hitting regrow, reroute is going to kind of update this. If it doesn't look like, if what you're seeing doesn't reflect the changes you've made, you're going to want to go down here and hit these buttons so that it will update it. So the other option is how these hairs will be grown. You can have normals, which is the direction of the face of the polygon. You can change a custom direction. So these are all going X now. Or you can have them all going Y, etc. Or you can do random, which is going to give you a randomized direction for each one of these hairs. This can be fun, but you're not going to get nearly as much control over the hair object if you're looking for a specific style. So let's go back to normal. And the next thing we want to do, so okay, we've explored the guides. We have 10 of them. And this tells the hairs where to grow. There are 5,000 hairs per guide right now. Let's lower that so we can get a little bit more understanding of what's happening here. Okay, so the next thing we'll look at is the segments. If we go up to simulate hair mode, whoops, and we go to points, it will show us the segments. Now the segments for so there's segments in the guide and in the hair. The segments for the guides are going to dictate how it interacts with things like wind, gravity, etc. How the hairs bend. The guides bend. The hairs, on the other hand, their segments are going to dictate how much fidelity you get in the detail of the hair material. So if you have very curly hair, very frizzy hair, the higher this number, the higher fidelity you're going to get. They're not going to look as steppy. So think of it like if you have a spline, a linear spline, and you want to put in and have it bend, the more segments you have on that spline, the more cleanly that spline is going to appear to bend. So let's go back to here, to the guides, and hit play. As you see, that the guides are dictating where the hair bends. If we increase this, and be careful going up too high because this can crash your computer very easily. Go back to start, hit play again, and now you see you're going to get much more fluid hair movements. Now, one detail that I want to cover right now, while we're talking about the gravity and how it applies to the guides, is going over to dynamics. Now, the one thing that can be helpful if you have a hair system that's bending a little too closely to the surface that the hair is coming out of, you can ask to hold roots. I'm going to increase this to 99. Play it again. And it's going to make sure that the curves do not bend at all near where the root is, which is where it's based, which is coming from, similar to our own hair. Something else you can explore is stiffness, which will make the hair a little bit less fluid, or a little bit less limp, if you will. So we'll go to 22, hit play again, and you see now they're very loose. So go back to start. I'm going to change this back to 100. And drag is something else we want to look at. We're going to put this up to 99 just so we can see the result. So drag is essentially how much resistance the hair has against the gravity. So it's like think of it like wind. So it's got a little bit more resistance to the gravity. So it takes a little bit longer to fall. It gives you a little bit more control over what you're trying to accomplish. Let's put this back to 20, or put it to 20. Mass is the mass of these hairs. So if you change it to, let's go to 99 just so we can see the results of it. They're very heavy now. So Think about these things as weighing 1,000 pounds now, these strands. They just fall and they're not going to swing. They're just weighed down way too much. So we're going to keep that at 1, which I think is pretty reflective of how a hair would fall. Let's try 0.1. Let's see how that works. Well, okay. Let's change this back to 2. I believe is where we found it. I'd play again. Yeah, now we see a little bit how. Now we can explore mass. So as you see, it's swept very quickly right through. And it did the same thing with mass. So let's not talk about mass. Elastic limit, rest mix, rest hold, deform. These are all things that are helpful in certain scenarios, but I don't think we're going to need to dive deep into these today. There's also different ways to use curves to more directly influence how these certain attributes apply to these hairs. Sorry, to these guides. We can discuss collisions in a little bit, but first let's go into the hair material a little bit and the actual hairs themselves. So let's bring this back down to 500 so we can see a little bit more. So if you go down to roots, you can offset these and have it start a little bit further away from the surface. Extend appears to do the exact opposite. So if we go up here, we are going the opposite direction. We're going to go further into the surface that the hairs are coming off of. Growth, let's not touch that yet, but we're going to explore cloning real quickly. Cloning is another way to clone hairs. So instead of actually increasing the count of the hairs, you can clone all 500. And again, it will help render times. It will help with your computer's memory and crashing, etc. So if we want to make them a little bit closer to each other, we can lower this to 0. So the root of the hair is 0 centimeters from the original, which is just going to be duplicated essentially, but having the exact same spot. The tips, again, if you go higher number, you're going to have a higher variant as to how far away it is from the original. So you want to have a little bit, or it's kind of pointless to have them. I have noticed that sometimes you're going to get weird results when you're doing the simulation and working with the dynamics with the clones. So it's good to use sometimes, but we're going to leave it for 0 for this case. So let's bring this up to 5,000 again. And bring this up to 50, I think. Let's see here. So the other thing we're going to explore real quick is length, which is very self-explanatory. Change the length. This is also something that can be changed in the material. So that is the basics of how to set up a hair system, how you're going to get your guides to operate, the mechanics behind the guides, how you can have more control over them, how you can get them to show up differently on the piece of geometry that you're using, and how the hairs work relative to those guides, as well as how we're going to work with a little bit of the properties of stiffness, holding it to the roots, etc. So next we're going to be going over the material, which is going to give us a lot more finer control over the hair. Now that we've covered the basics of the hair system in Cinema, let's go in and figure out how to refine it a little bit more detailed. So we're going to do that by So I've got an extra hair material down here. We're going to go to the hair material object that's down here. And when you open it up, you're going to see that you have all these options now. Color, specular, thickness, scale, kink, clump, displace, curl. You start getting into hair attributes, essentially. Length is something that we just covered in the last one. This gives you finer control over that. Straighten, twist, bend, density. See, these are all things that give you much more fine control over the actual hair itself, the hairstyle, if you will. So first thing I want to do is I want to reduce the thickness of these hairs. They are looking a little bit too much like looking at hair through a microscope. I'm going to put it 0.1. It's always good to have the tip, maybe 0.2. It's good to have the tip a little bit smaller scale. Let's go to 0.05. And then it's nice to have a little bit variation in there as well. So we'll put 0.1. Okay, that's looking better. Now we can see a little bit better. Look, it's a little bit more realistic. We can explore scale. Scale is essentially what it sounds. It's going to change the thickness as well as the length of each one of these. I don't use that very often, so we'll click that. The other thing I want to change initially is length. So, you don't want to look like you're coming straight out of the barber shop, or that you've got a bowl cut like I used to get when I was a kid, where your mom literally puts a bowl on your head and cuts around it. You want to add a little variety to the length for realism. So if you go to length, if we select length, go to that tab, you'll realize, or you'll see that it's set to 100 with variation already at 20. So that's already added in. I'm going to increase it up to 50. Give us a little bit more variety there. And you can also adjust the amount of it, as well as you can use a texture to direct it where to have the variations. So now that we've got that set up, this is looking good to me. We can start to explore some of these hair characteristics. Let's go with kink first. And you're starting to get some real nasty looking stuff there. So there's a lot of options in here too, and this is where it gets really fun, because you can just go as deep as you want with this. And these then scale, kink amount, variation, etc., etc. Now we're going to be working with things that are directly impacted by the segments of the hairs. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit on this nasty hair, and let's increase the segments. You can see right here there's a kink. Actually, let's lower it first, and we'll be able to see it a little bit better. We zoom out, see all these kinks, and I'm going to try something here real quickly. Whoops, that's not what I meant to do. We'll undo that. Stay at 22. Take these hair segments to 5. Okay, so the hair segments, like I thought, do not impact the guide segments do not impact the hair segments. So let's put these back up. Let's put it to 50. So now you're seeing that these hair strands are all very, very clean. And this is good if you want to have larger scale curl type of stuff. But let's say, double click our material. So let's go to kink. And we're going to explore how to control some of these things a little bit more refinedly. First, let's increase this to 100%. We got full kink now. And again, the scale of that kink, it looks like someone just woke out of bed, or woke up and, that looks like some serious bedhead. Now, if we change this to 500 and 500, you see the scale of the kink is much, much more fine. But as a result of that, we're getting this kinking again. Maybe that's not the right word to use, considering we're in kink. You're getting a linear curve that's got a very hard angle in it. If we go back to the material, we go to hair segments again, put this up to 200. again, you're starting to see the render slow down to catch up. You're going to see a much more fine curve again. So we'll keep it at that. And double click on the material tag again. The next thing is let's change the variation a little bit, just make it more realistic. Go to 25%. These are all completely arbitrary numbers I'm using. Let's go to our curve. So this right here, the bottom left, is the root. The kink is applied to the root 0%. It's applied to the tip, which is all the way here at the top right, 100%. This would be 1. This would be 0.5. This is 0. So again, we can also use a texture map to define how this curve is done. But what I like to do is, well, you can also do some of these presets. But what I find works best is to take this 100% and drag it up some so that you don't have to wait till the very tip of the hair to get 100% results of this attribute. And you can even sometimes raise this up a little bit, raise the root, but sometimes it can start to get a little bit screwy and will reduce the amount of control that you have over this. Okay, let's click off kink. We'll get some combinations of these going later, but let's just explore each one for now. Let's go to clump. Clump's exactly like it sounds. This is how you're going to get some dreads, basically, or some killer spike action. Now, again, there's a lot of different options here. Count. This is interesting. That should be how many of the how many of the hairs clump together. Do you want 100% of your hairs to do it, or do you want, let's just try 1 and see if, all right. So we're just going to say that this is a number that we're going to ignore. Clump percent, let's go up to 100%. And then this should be how much, or the strength of the clump. Again, we can change that down here if we want to have a little bit more manual control over that. Say, you know what, I want these super spikes to go all the way down to the head. Keep length. If we turn it off, it will keep the length. So let's put this back over to the right a little bit. I think that's a little bit much. Let's bring the clump down to 50 and variation 25, I think, is usually good. So the next thing the next option we have here is the radius. So this is the radius of this base clump. If we bring it up to 100, that's going to be our full polygon. Our polygon is 100 centimeters. That should clump at 100 centimeters. Let's take this down to 1 and see what's happening here. Yeah, so if you go to 1 now, it's every single centimeter is the clump. So you've got, let's bring this back up a little bit so we can see the results a little better. And maybe let's increase the hair amount. Let's do 1500. It's going to have to think for a little bit. Okay, so now you can see these clumps. They are 1 centimeter in radius. So in theory, you should have 1,000 of them because it's 100 by 100. Now let's go back to the clumping. Oh, maybe that's why it wasn't working right. Okay, so we have that at 5. Okay, so let's raise this back up to 10 so we can get something that looks more accurate to the scale we're working with here. All right, so there we go. That looks pretty good. So, you know, for whatever it is that you're going with, let's twist these bad boys up now. So if we increase the twist, yeah, my computer's not liking live updates too much anymore. Let's do 100 degrees. So this should twist it to about, 6 o'clock if they're all started at 12. Yeah, and you're seeing it's going to go from base, or from root to tip. So from the root to tip, it's going to twist 100 degrees. So it's not going to be very visible down here, but you're going to be seeing it. The more you increase this number, it's going to be much more visible. And again, this one has variation as well that you can work with. So displacement is pretty much like it sounds. It's going to be similar to material displacement. Curl. It's funny that I would not want to have been challenged with coming up with the names for each of these. Curl, 70 degrees. So again, it's going to go 70 degrees curl. Look at that amazing hairdo. Yeah, 70 degree wave there. On that epic haircut. Again, variation is built in. Direction hair, you can do direction random. We're going to have all kinds of wild curls going all over. And so again, what I said about not wanting to be the person that had to name these systems, I think you can sometimes achieve very similar results with different styles here, but each one gives you the ability to do something very special. So let's look at another one, wave. You know what, I'm going to reduce this. Let's put this at 100, and let's put this to just 1,000. This should update much more quickly now. Okay, let's go back to our wave. You can see you got a little bit of wavy style. I wish I could come up with something witty for every one of these. To give an example of somebody that has hair like this. This kind of looked like Elon Musk's current hair, I would say. And so this is another one that has scale. So scale, again, is how small of scale that wave is going to be. So if we put it up to 500 and 500, you're going to get some really wavy hair. Probably, oh, that's why, 5,000. That. All right, see, again, still, that's looking a little goofy. Let's try 100. Yeah, so it's just going to squish this thing down. Use at your discretion. Transparency, backlit color are as they sound. Length, frizz. Frizz is a good one that I use a lot. It will give you some very fine frizzy hair. Let's put this up to 1,000. And 1,000 might be too much, but we will see. Give it a second to update. Lower this a little bit so we're affecting closer to the root. Let's do 50%. So frizz, again, you're getting some super frizzy hair there, right? Density. It's going to be default at 100%. Let's check it out at 500. And it doesn't like that. Let's skip density. Tighten. Again, let's explore it at 100. And this is just going to... I wish I could remember the big orange guy's name from Bugs Bunny. Bend, twist, straighten. Again, these are all we don't have to go through each one of these. They are as they sound. Bend is similar to curl. Twist is something that we saw in Clump, I believe. It's going to give you just the opportunity to apply twist to whatever you have. And let's see. So the other thing that's interesting is we can do several of these at once. So if we want to turn on kink and curl, which we may have to revisit because I think I kind of ruined curl. And I want it to go the hair direction. And let's lower, let's apply, there we go. Let's apply that strength so it's a little bit closer to the scalp. And so before we move on, a lot of these attributes to the hair are going to compress it significantly. So when you start out and the strands are straight, it's going to look like your hair is super, super long. But when you apply some of these attributes to it, it compresses it. So let's put this up to 1,000, the length. And voila. So now, let's back up a little bit. You've got something that was similar to the original hair length, but now it's got all of these attributes applied to it. And just for the sake, and I should have done this a little bit earlier, just for the sake of visual enjoyment, let's make this blue. And something worth noting is the hair material does not work perfectly in Octane, but that is something that we will dive into and check out next. Now that we've familiarized ourselves with the hair material and the hair system, let's go in and check out how to manually stylize this a little bit. I'm going to reduce the length back down to 100, so we have something a little bit easier to work with. I'm going to zoom in, and let's change this color to be a little bit brighter. That looks good. Okay, so let's go up to Simulate and Hair Tools. And I'm going to go to Brush. Now, brush is exactly like it sounds. There's some options here. How large of the brush radius, the shape of it, pressure, etc., angle. Selection only, so this would apply to the only the hairs that you have selected, and visible only, which I will turn off. I would like to be able to brush hairs that I cannot see as well. So this is very similar to sculpting, really. So what we're going to be doing is just selecting, holding, and moving. So it's also very similar to brushing hair. And as you can see, as I do this, let me increase the radius a little bit. Hold and drag. See, we're getting the ability now to directly, manually manipulate the shape of the hair. Now, if we want to go back in again and explore what it looks like to have the attributes get applied, it's going to be a little bit harder to tell because of the compressed hair from the attributes of the material. But again, you can still see that it's working. Now, if you did want to do, selection only, you would first need to go up. You can't just do this. Okay, you can't just grab the selection tool and select your hair. You need to go back up to Simulate, Hair Selection, and here you have the standard, Live Select, Rectangle, Lasso, and Polygon selection. You can also, everything that's in the selection for geometry is going to apply here. I'm just going to do Live Selection, and I'm going to increase the radius. No thank you, visible only. I'm going to select these guys here, or gals. I'm going to go back to my brush, selection only now, and now if I brush, it's only going to affect the vertices, or I'm sorry, the segments of the guides, and that's what we're brushing. So if you want more fine control over it, you're going to increase the segments. Now, we can also, if we want to change the length manually, this is a very good tool, cut. Now, I do not want to do selected only. Let me deselect selection, deselect all. Okay, so now this is very similar to what it sounds. You're going to cut the hair, radius 20. So anything within this radius is going to get cut. If you cut something at the base, it's going to cut it all the way to the top. Or you can just kind of give it a little trim. And if you notice, what's really cool is it will update the vertice count to the new length of these hairs. So if you cut these tips off, it's gonna redistribute those vertices, or those what do we got, segments. So the next one, let's check out a couple other things here in the hair tools. Let's go to curl. This one's pretty interesting. So again, well, we can go through all of these, but pretty much what it's going to do is it's going to give you the ability to manually do the things that we were doing to the hair in the material section, but we're doing it directly to the guides now. So you don't even need to select anything. You can automatically just click and drag to the right, and it's going to essentially randomize where the vertices are, or where the segments are. I don't know why I keep forgetting the name of that. So now that we've done that, we've got this hair, it's all screwed up. There's a couple ways to reset it if you want. You can go to regrow, reroot, or let's screw it up again real quick. I'm dragging to the right. I'm going to go to hair tools, and now we're going to go to straighten. Now this is one that you can apply again, or go over here and click and drag. And it's going to straighten those hairs back out to where you found them. All right, so the next thing that I think is worth exploring. So what we've done so far, basically, we've gone through and we've looked at all the ways to stylize hair, essentially. We've looked at how to control the amount so we can control how much it bends, etc. We've learned how to control the density of the hair so that we can change how fine the style or the attributes of the hair is. For example, frizz, the more segments we have, the finer we're going to be able to manipulate that hair. So for the purpose of what we're going to do next, which is exploring the dynamics, let's turn off kink so we can see straight hair, and we'll keep the rest of it as is. I'm going to simulate. Let's go to forces. Now, there's, yeah, this is right. Okay, pardon me. So let's go to forces, and we're going to go to wind first. Now, thankfully, this is a very simple way now to see kind of where the wind's headed. You see a windmill. Everybody knows what a fan looks like, I would think. Let's move it over to the side a little and rotate it so it's coming at an angle to the hair. Let's look at it from a little bit of a top angle. and hit play. You can see immediately it pushes it to the side. Now, let's actually turn this up a little bit so we can see. So wind speed, this is how quickly the wind moves across the hair. So if we move it up, you're going to see now it's pointing over to the side more. If we had turbulence, you know what? Let's do this first. Something that also impacts the direction of the hair is the gravity. So let's just turn that off right now. So if you go to forces, gravity, we're going to hit 0. Now there's no gravity. You hit play. Now you can see the effect of the wind a lot more because there's no gravity also impacting it. Let's get a better angle on that. So now if we're going to add some turbulence, it is just like it sounds. 50% strength. Essentially what it does is it adds randomness to the wind. The scale, so think of it like noise. The turbulence is noise. We've applied it 50% strength, but let's lower the scale and see what that does. So it's essentially changing the scale of the noise. Let's go up a little bit higher even. And maybe we need to increase the guides a little bit so that we can see this better. Okay, so we've got a lot more hairs. Bring it back to start, hit play. And you'll see all the hairs move in one direction. If we reduce the turbulent scale, you're going to get a lot of randomization in there now. And the frequency is basically the speed of the turbulence. So it would be like the loop speed in a noise. Acceleration, force, and aerodynamics. I think this is something that is not something that really is applicable to hair too much, so we can skip over that. Something else now. If we want to, so if you notice when we saw the gravity initially, it was -9. Let's put it at 9 now and see what happens. And we can even turn the wind off. So your hair is going to go straight up. So again, the beauty of 3D is there is no set rules on the physics of it. The physics are as we dictate the physics will be. Let's put that back. Force objects, sometimes your hair will go right through the object that they're coming off of. This is very problematic sometimes. So what we're going to do is add a tag onto it. Hair tag, hair collider. And we won't spend too much time on this, but now it will slow down a little bit. But essentially, whenever any piece of hair hits that polygon now, it will restrict it from penetrating through it. So you will not see anything, you will see no hairs going through the geometry that it's coming off of. Let's see what else we want to explore in terms of forces. We already looked at turbulence. We can look at rotation, which is pretty interesting. Again, let's scoot back a little bit. Angle speed. Let's see what's at 20. You're going to get twisting essentially. So again, there's many ways to achieve, this is a dynamic twist basically. So if you want to turn this on with the wind, you're going to get turbulence because we have that in the wind. You're going to get wind blowing to the side, and you're going to get this rotation, this twisting. Now, what if you want to have this in a MoGraph setup with cloners? Let's clear out the dynamic forces, and let's put our polygon here into a cloner. I'm going to hold Alt on a PC and left click while holding the polygon object, and it's going to clone them out. So if we drag the cloner now into the hair object and hit regrow, update guides, nothing happens. So what we need to do if we want to apply the hair to the cloner is we're going to need to use the connector object. So right click on the subdivision surface icon, hold down Alt with your cloner selected and hit connect. Now this turns this basically into a static piece of geometry, or it makes it act like it's been edited or made editable. So now if we go back and click on our hair and we drag in the connect object, and hit regrow, there we go. Now it's being applied to all of them. And again, if we hit play, everything is applicable to all of the clones. Now, if you notice that it looks much more sparse, you know, these polygons are now balding a little bit. So in order to keep up with the new amount of geometry, you're going to have to increase it exponentially to how many clones you have. So you're cloning your guides on these cloned polygons. But let's say that we want just these outer ones to have the hair and be selected. Let's hide the hair for a second. So let's select the cloner. Go to MoGraph selection. And let's set turns on now. And as you go over these guides here, you'll see them turn off and on. Click off. Now, as you do that, this MoGraph selection tag is going to pop up. And what that does is it says, I want all the ones with the yellow little buttons on them to be applied. And if you turn this back on, it's not going to have any impact though. So what you need to do while you've got this selected is go back up to MoGraph and select Hide Selected. This will hide the polygon that was selected with our selection set. And maybe we need to do that with it selected. Or maybe it's just not working properly. Let's try this again. Let's turn the hair off. Try to invert this maybe. Okay, interesting. So they're all selected. So let's try let's go back here and go to our MoGraph selection. Okay, now it's working. So if we go over them, we can turn some on and off. And now if we apply the hair, you will see that it's only displaying on the clones that are selected by the selection tag. So another easy thing to do if you want to switch them on and off is you can use invert, and that will display the hidden ones. And you can use fields and several other things in here, but this is a really, really great tool for being able to explore tons of different ways to use the hair. The hair is applicable to all these different systems. The selection set is a really powerful tool to working with the cloner objects in the MoGraph. But again, the hair system is an absolute blessing. Do not ignore this thing. It's super fun. So hope that you enjoyed this. Thank you so much for watching. It was really a pleasure to be able to present to you and be part of your learning experience. I know that part of my favorite part about Cinema 4D and why I use it is because of the simplicity of use and my journey through learning in Cinema 4D has been just an incredibly memorable experience, and I've learned through watching and trial and error. So it's really an honor to be part of your learning experience in Cinema 4D. Thank you very much.